Hogan Assessments provide a framework and a common language so that people, instead of talking about stereotypes and biases that we all bring to life, right? They have a common language and a structure.
How can I manage myself? But also, what does the individuals in my team need from me, or how can I manage them to such an extent?
What I tend to find is where people have different natural skills. My experience, though, when you talk about building trust.
People are the most consequential and dangerous forces on earth. Well, personality psychology is about the nature of human nature. It's about people. And wouldn't that be useful to know?
The Science of Personality podcast, brought to you by Hogan Assessments.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the special episode of The Science of Personality, in person, on video, and in beautiful Miami, Florida. Today, we're joined by Jani Wiggett, Director at JVR Psychometrics in South Africa, Melvyn Payne, Commercial Director at Advanced People Strategies in the UK, and Roberto Santos, Managing Director at Ateliê HR in Brazil. And today we're going to talk about the bright side of personality, which Hogan measures with its flagship assessment, the Hogan Personality Inventory. But before we get to that, Jani, Melvyn, Roberto, why don't y'all tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Thank you so much for having us. This is really exciting to be here. I'm an industrial psychologist. I've been working with the HPI for about 15 years. Yes, as you already mentioned, a South African and a mother of three. So loving Miami at this point.
Great. Melvyn?
Yeah, so, I've been at Advanced People Strategies now for probably 18 years, and it's our 21st anniversary as a Hogan distributor. So I always
Congrats.
say, though, thank you, I'm a bit poacher turned gamekeeper with these two experienced psychologists. My background is finance rather than people.
Oh, really? Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Some sensible person among us, right?
Yeah. We've got some versatility in this room. I can feel it.
Yeah.
What about you, Roberto?
I'm also an industrial psychologist. I've worked in HR for 27 years, and now my company is going to be 23 years in August, so it's a long time. And I've been with Hogan since 2003, so it's 22 years now. So it's the first country in Latin America to have a distributor. So I'm very honored, very privileged, and very happy to be here in person with Blake. Unfortunately, as you said, Ryan won't be able to be with us, right? Because he's coaching his son. Yes. But it's great having us here for this chat in beautiful Miami, as you said.
Well, we're happy to have you. So you all are enjoying Miami. Jani, you mentioned you like
beautiful people, wonderful weather. It's absolutely a stunning place.
It's beautiful, isn't it? Yes.
Absolutely.
Melvyn,
arrived late yesterday and beautiful beach that we saw. So great.
Awesome, excellent. Get some beach time while you're here.
We do some shopping also when we come to Miami. I think it's part of the deal here when we come. And it's good to be inside and outside because it's very, very warm, but very, very good to be in Miami once more. I've been many times here and love it.
Well, yeah, this is actually my first time to actually visit and get to see things around here. I've been through the airport, but this is the first time here, having a great time. The food's been phenomenal. But all that set aside, let's get to it. So for my first question, because you all come from, different regions of the world, could you each describe how you explain the Hogan Personality Inventory to new prospects or clients, and what seems to work best for you? And, Melvyn, take this one.
Yeah, sure. I guess my experience is we're quite lucky in the UK. A lot of people understand psychometrics and assessments. So for me, it's about how do I differentiate what HPI means. My very quick way of explaining it is that HPI is not designed to tell you what you're like. It's designed to tell you what everybody else might think you're like. And compared to the other tools, if you imagine what you're like on a first date, that's what the HPI is designed to predict. So not whether people will find you attractive, but how you're likely to show up most of the time when you're at your best.
Or at least that's how we hope we show up on our first date.
Absolutely.
Jani, what do you think?
I absolutely agree with that. I think in the South African market, it is really a red ocean when it comes to personality assessment. So there's a lot that you can choose from. But I think, the Hogan has really stood the test of time. So the fact that there's that it's got such a rich history of research that's backing it. And then, talking to how it measures reputation is really, it's unique compared to what you see some of the others to do. So it's not a difficult sell. Just, if you know the assessment and you know how thorough the measurement is, it's quite easy.
Yeah. And Roberto, what do you think?
It's a very usual people come to us because they are, we have this shallow kind of tools now, and we hear that at Hogan we can have a deeper dive into one's personality, think in terms of predicting work performance, predicting potential. Because one thing is, I use this tool for my self-awareness. Okay, you can use horoscope for that, But when you talk about Hogan, you're talking about, validated research, and then you can prevent from, discriminating people. That's a key element in that Hogan always looked after, right? And also because in Brazil, we have the possibility of evaluating using the global norm or the Brazilian norm so that you have some cultural relevance as well to the assessment, right?
Yeah, and I mean, really, that is kind of the beauty of Hogan, is because, the way you all describe that, and, from your respective region and part of the world, it's neat to see that Hogan, even though you have maybe different challenges or opportunities, that Hogan is pretty universal, and that it people can find value in it. And like you just said, you can use the global norm or the Brazilian norm, things like that. That's why whenever we tell people that, we put a lot of science and a lot of scientific vigor into our assessments and keeping them at the top of the market, so you all have the best thing possible to go out there and put in front of your clients. I think we're all really proud of that, and we can't stress enough how important our international distributors network is, and we're just loving the fact that you all are here and that you all do this for us on a daily basis. So it's really great. So for my next question, how do you see a leader's day-to-day personality characteristics influencing their overall leadership style?
Yeah. When it's just when I first thought about that question, when you shoot us the question, I remembered Bob Hogan's book, the who you are determines of how you lead, right?
Correct.
So I think that's basic, when you talk about leadership brand, which is personal branding, leadership branding, right? Or strategic executive presence. You're talking about personality. You're talking about people's reputation, right?
Right.
So in terms of developing one's personality for a leader, his reputation of how he engages people, how he attracts and retains people, I think that's key for, it's almost the same. Talking about reputation is your leadership brand, right? So that's critical.
I agree. I think we are changing the way in which we are looking at leadership. It's slowly changing, but I do think it is changing. It's not about us stepping into leadership anymore. It's not about people thinking that they are wearing certain leadership shoes to some extent. I think leadership is becoming something that is inherent. I think us understanding what is leadership is, it's something that you are from morning to noon. It is not a specific role or a specific responsibility. It is you. And it really depends, or it really, I believe, people are not seeing leadership as something external to somebody, but it is everything about you. And hence then why personality is so critically important, because it is an inborn, disposition that you embrace and that you need to be cognizant of.
I think that's right. So for us, thinking about leadership style, we'll all have our own tendencies. We lean one way more than another. We're not all lucky enough to be ambidextrous like you. So when we talk about leadership versatility, if I've got a high prudence score, I'm likely to have a style that's more structured, organized, low prudence, more flexible.
Like me.
There you go. So I guess for us, it's about predicting what's my natural style.
Okay.
So I can then help to work out where do I need to adjust or dial it up, dial it down to be more effective.
Yeah, and there seems to have been, which I didn't understand. So I've been at Hogan now for 10 years, and I don't have the background in IO psychology, but it was a great opportunity for me to kind of take on a new challenge from a PR perspective. But you can't help but learn these things along the way. I mean, that's why I'm doing hundreds of feedbacks now for fun, because I enjoy it. But I think what I've seen from when I started to now is I do think we are starting to see the narrative around what leadership means. I think we're starting to move the needle, and I think Hogan's at the forefront of that. And the way you all describe this, I think it's just having the wealth of knowledge that you all have, and then tying that to what like our data science team and group is doing back at Hogan. This just makes for one big happy family, and that's how we actually. We think of our distributors as family. And so, again, I'm just so happy to be here with you all. So this is really fun. But let's move on. Let's get to some more questions. So we're going to transition to teams now. How about that?
Yep.
So how do you use the HPI to help teams better understand each other's working styles and to build trust? Melvyn, you want to start on that one? Or Jani?
Sure. I think for me, when we think about HPI in teams, what we're looking at is the different skills and the mix of characteristics that we have in the group. So again, often when we think about high-performing teams, it's about what's that mix of natural skills that we need. And HPI gives us that indicator of what the presence is in the team. I think my experience, so when you talk about building trust, what I tend to find is where people have different natural skills, they tend to notice the negative before they notice the positive.
That seems to be the case.
So being able to appreciate, somebody who talks a lot more than me is okay, as long as I can fill in the gaps for them and they understand they need to listen. But do I appreciate the skills that they bring if it's about networking and promoting the team and the organization?
I think it provides, Hogan HPI or the whole Hogan assessments provide a framework and a common language so that people, instead of talking about stereotypes and biases that we all bring to life, right? They have a common language and a structure on the HPI to discuss working styles and leadership styles, and understanding that the beauty is the diversity and the synergy that you can create from different personalities, not trying to structure. And we've been using for, I believe, 10 years now, the Hogan Team Report. I don't know if you use it in South Africa or UK, where we translate the HPI scales into psychological roles and then create an opportunity for people to discuss and fill the gaps, as you said, in terms of the best for the high performance.
Yeah.
And that's key to what you just said as well. So I think it relates certain behaviors that is closely connected to performance. So it's not merely knowing each other for the sake of knowing each other, managing each other for the sake of it. It is what is necessary to understand, related to what's going to make us a high potential team or a high potential individual, high performing team at the end of the day. So it is relevant information that's captured. It definitely does give you insight into how can I manage myself, but also what does the individuals in my team need from me, or how can I manage them to such an extent that can really bring the best out of them because of circumstances that changes. We sometimes think we put a person in a position and that person will be a high-performing individual regardless of the context and the circumstances, but it won't. Everything is changing constantly. One instance, this person will be ideal for a specific job, and then suddenly with change, he's not going to be ideal anymore, and it's for him to be able to recognize, now I need to step back, but also for the team to step in, So it is that interaction of ever-changing things.
Yeah. And so, Melvyn, you said something that struck me, and I have a great example for myself, because I mentioned, okay, I'm low prudence. But what you don't see is the person who made all of this happen is in the room next door, Whitney. And if she wasn't on the team that I'm on in Hogan, none of this would have happened. So, you have to have that high prudence sometimes working with that low prudence on that team. it fills these different gaps. Maybe I do have some of that flexibility, but I can guarantee you, if I need to get something done, she's going to tell me.
Yeah.
She's going to let me know.
Yeah.
So,
And when you leave your ego behind and you trust that someone can fill your gap, that's the beauty of working in teams, right?
Exactly. Well, this is great. So now let's talk a little bit about organizational effectiveness as a whole. How have you seen HPI data shape organizational decisions about leadership development? I'm sure you all coming from so many different places with different scenarios, examples. Let's just hear from around the room. Jani, you want to kick it off here?
Yes, we recently had a opportunity, for example, where we worked with a very small, I say 60 odd individuals in an organization who all had the opportunity to complete the Hogan suite. We were able to view on an aggregated level the differences between the leadership group, which consisted of about 11, 12 people, and then the rest of the organization. And because this was a fully virtual company still, meaning that they, after COVID, had to move into a virtual work setting, lots of gaps in processes, communication, and various other things resulted in a little bit of performance issues and things that they wanted to address. One of the big things, or two big things that stood out, was with everybody completing the Hogan assessments, they were able to go through individual development plans, etc. But from a leadership perspective, they were able to identify the big differences between ambition, between leadership group and the rest of the organization, prudence being a lot higher with your rest of the organization compared to your leadership group, and then your sociability. Your leadership group was quite high, very communicative in terms of sociability, aggregated average on their percentiles, whereas your rest of the organization was really very low, lack of communication. And those insights and being able to show leadership the differences between the rest of the organization's aggregated results and what they need to do to help the rest of the organization improve communication, work with regards to initiatives and ambition being quite low with the rest of the organization's group, but just understanding one another and implementing certain things to actually improve was amazing to see the results. But I think it is on an aggregated level really, really great to actually look at data that assist in policy making, procedures to be implemented, and not only on a personal development perspective.
Very interesting. Okay. Roberto, how about you?
When we think about organizational effectiveness, think of using Hogan to develop all the elements in HR selection and succession, to build and instill it in the whole organization takes time. Sometimes the price restrictions we have in Brazil, it limits a little bit to do it all at once and ingrained in all process of HR. But it usually starts with the top leadership, because when these people, they see the SAMs, how effective they are or not effective they are in terms of their experience, then they'll start drilling down to the organization, then the organizational effectives. But I think usually starts in the top, starts with the top leadership, and they recognize the value, and each one want to bring to their own team. Then you start really doing the magic of organization effectiveness.
That's also when you start actually creating that common language, where they be able to speak to what is measured by the Hogan and actually highlighting that for one another in your day-to-day operations. Oh man, I really need somebody that's high on prudence for this task because X, Y, and Z, for example. And that is when magic happens.
But still, I think that's very, very real. But one thing that I always insert in my selling point in the beginning is that Hogan is not like other tools that you put the person in a box of a type, right? Because you just add skills. I need to complement my low prudence, right? Instead of but he's a
Yes.
XPTO.
That's where you got me cringing a little bit earlier because you were talking. You mentioned the horoscope.
Yeah.
And so that's something I get because people ask me, "What do you do?" I work with this place called Hogan Assessments, and they well, what do they do? And I start telling them, well, we're a personality assessment company, and it's like, so like, do you all do horoscopes? And before I was like, well, that's not exactly it. Now, if they bring up horoscope, I just give them a smile, turn around, walk away. I'm just like, I can't. I don't even know if I can get in. No, seriously though, that it is fun to be able to explain that. Yeah. And I also love the fact that if you all don't get to see it quite as much on a day-to-day basis, it might be like that in your respective, firms where you work. But whatever you have 150 employees who are all using, somebody's derailing, somebody's you're high mischievous is showing. Not that we're talking about that assessment right now, but you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And we all know what we mean. We're speaking a common language. It's helps. A common language, yeah. And I think that's really unique and fun about Hogan. And also, I love the fact that we don't put people in a box. Don't label people. There are literally 72 quadrillion potential outcomes of the 3 assessments that we administer to people on a regular basis. I don't know how I remember that number, but our friend Jackie, who, if you listen to the podcast, you've heard her. She told me that 8 years ago, and I can't forget it.
They did a calculation of how many possibilities.
Yeah, I think whenever you're looking like, what would that be? So 7, 11, 18, 28 scales.
28 scales, 0 to 100.
Yeah, 0 to 100. I'm not checking the math because I am a public relations person, and we go into that field because we don't want to do math. But that's what we are. But Melvyn,
there is the benefit as organizations grow the level of data to look at it more strategically. And I guess with my commercial director hat on, I usually say, how do you squeeze as much out of Hogan as you can? And just 2 examples come to mind. One organization assessed sort of 3 years worth of mid to senior leadership programs. And what they couldn't understand is each year they were getting really negative feedback about their program. And each year they were trying to improve it. And what we were able to help them with is that they've got a very low adjustment culture at that level.
Okay.
With high skeptical in the HDS. But we were saying, so naturally people are likely to be more critical about if you ask them the question, what do you like? So we were able to help them out to say, why don't you change the question? They're a high inquisitive culture. Just to say, use an open question that says, what could we do differently? And they started to get more productive information coming through their surveys when they were asking about the program. And again, similarly, again, just using adjustment, but with ambition, one culture where, again, over a period of time, we've been able to show them that on their programs, what they weren't including in their program was how to look after my own well-being as a leader. And they've got, again, a very low adjustment culture. So we were able to help them with more volume learning to say, maybe you want to help this particular group of people. Yeah. We're looking after their own well-being first.
Yeah.
So just a couple of examples.
Yeah. I mean, we like to say, if we try to tell people, low score. People see something. They see their HPI, and they see very little yellow on that, and they're thinking, I failed. I failed. But there, even to our low adjustment people, there are
there's strengths.
There's strengths there too as well. I need them around me to tell me the building's on fire because I don't notice. I'm like 112 adjustments. So.
But when we think about those things, we had one client who said about that. The leaders were looking at scores, assuming that high is always good and low is always bad.
Right.
So just for a bit of fun, what we did is we inverted the colors on HPI charts for one of the leaders.
Really?
Took out the scores and explained it exactly the same way, but because it looked like he got higher scores.
That's amazing.
The message was still the same. Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. I love that. Hey, and that takes some creativity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, okay, this conversation's going great. So let's move on to our next question, which is and this before I get to my last question, I want to touch on succession planning, because this is something that I think organizations really need to take seriously. It's something at Hogan that we've always talked about, but we want to put a little bit more of an emphasis on it, because I think you come to realize that there are a lot of companies out there who maybe don't know how important this is. But as we get into succession planning, can you share an example more specific around the HPI that helped reveal a successor who might otherwise have been overlooked, and that maybe whenever we talk about the emergence versus effectiveness, how have you seen this maybe happen with the HPI, where maybe the not popular pick, or maybe the pick that nobody was really even thinking of? I like to think of them as hidden in plain sight, but Roberto, why don't you take this one first?
It's very, we usually are hired because people want to make a decision on finalists, either with internal candidates or external candidates. And sometimes we appoint exactly not the popular one. We love this guy in interviews, and we point at that. And sometimes when they follow their instinct and they hire, then later on they come back and say, well, you were right. Hogan was right, because they picked. I think the advantage of being so, we feel assured. I mean, I think we all feel assured when you're saying that, because it's not Roberto or Jani or Melvyn that is saying, it's a research of almost 40 years saying that this person probably will act like this and that in this context. So, and that's not what you're expecting, then you better reconsider, right? So I think it gives us assurance that you're giving a very probable indication. And as you said, many times is not the most emergent, but is the most effective person.
And I think we don't necessarily get that right always. Because in South Africa, a lot of people still rely on the politics within the organization, the social standing, the sociability skills being quite high, and they definitely do miss those effective leaders who may not be selling themselves as effectively as what others would potentially do. There's multiple examples where where we've been able to identify for a client that you may have missed this individual, but there's a lot here, or the inverse as well is that you are highlighting or identifying these three individuals, but all of them very high sociability, high interpersonal skills, but very low, for example, inquisitiveness and potentially more mid-range ambition. What we've seen in the South African sample is our leadership performance. First of all, it tends to be people who are relatively high on all the HPI scales, but ambition and inquisitiveness is quite important for leaders to be effective. So those one, especially inquisitive, I do believe in the coming years as well, is going to become even more important to certain organizations. But then they would need a team that balances, the implementation, for example. But no, there's multiple examples of how the HPIs informed succession planning.
And I think that you talked about emergence and effectiveness, and Dr. Hogan's great presentation a few years ago on humility. We see that similarly a lot. The quieter, perhaps more modest leaders don't show up as much, but then it's about, what do we use alongside Hogan? So we got other sort of practical assessments to validate performance, like a 360 assessment center, skills pilot for us. So do we see them actually perform, as well as seeing the energy and the outgoing nature?
Right. Yeah. And so this, I feel like I have to tell a story in some capacity. I'm not going to mention the name. This is actually, because I don't deal with a lot with like the client side of things. There are some things, people think, maybe let's have Blake take a look at this, because it's maybe an area of interest for me. I'm not going to spoil anything. I don't want to say anything. But what we saw happen is that there was a leadership vacancy. And basically this group, this XYZ organization, got down to 2 candidates. And that got up there. And they chose their pick, And that's whenever it was actually Ryan came to me and he slaps two flash reports, but HPI, HTS, I look at it. He goes, which one of these two would you hire for this particular position? If it was just you're just looking at this. I looked at it and I was like, oh, well, this one. And he said, they didn't. That person was in that position for 1 year. A year later, the other person took the job and things are turning around. It's amazing. It's amazing. So you can't, and you want to know why? It was because the first guy had such a great interview. And that's why you really
Often
just can't
happens.
base things off of interviews. So
And it's good for us when it backfires, something like the example, right? Because there are clients, the CEO said, well, I want to see the Hogan of this guy.
Yeah.
And then they are converted, deeply in terms of feeling that they'll be a better, informed to make a decision, not going through their impact, interpersonal impact of the candidate, right, on the interview.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation, but I'm not quite done with you all yet. I do have one more question before we let you all go and enjoy the beautiful weather out there in Miami. So for my final question, can you share an example of a leader whose self-awareness around their HPI, so through their feedback, I think more so than anything, has helped them improve how they lead? So they're already in that position. They see that HPI. They learn a little bit more about themselves. Have you seen that? Any examples you can share? You don't have to share any names. You can keep it anonymous because, unfortunately, a lot of our people don't want people to know that we work with them publicly because they don't want their potential competitor to find out who we are. That's just one of those things. But Melvyn, you want to kick this one off for us?
Yeah, there's one example. I actually asked the individual for permission to share the conversation we had. And I used to share it in certification workshops. So the gentleman in context was a very senior leader, very successful. And we were doing work feeding back to him and his individual team members. Just for background, he has very high ambition, sociability, and very low interpersonal sensitivity. So when it came to interpersonal sensitivity, my feedback was you're likely to come across as somebody who's quite assertive, keeps it rational when you're communicating with people. But with those other scores, you might be seen as a bit tough, a bit direct, maybe a bit intimidating to people. And actually what he said back was, Melvyn, that's wrong. He said, I'm not like that at all. I'm a really nice guy and everybody knows it around here.
Of course.
And I guess that was a learning point for me. It was the first time a few years ago that I felt confident enough to say, actually, how do you think it feels to be me on the receiving end of that comment? And how do you think it's perceived by somebody that doesn't know you well?
Yeah.
But he didn't agree. And again, just as an example, I usually say to people, if you don't see your sort of behavior matching your Hogan, check it with people you trust.
Yeah.
And he rang his CFO at the time while we were in the feedback, explained to the CFO what had been said. Put the phone down and he said, I really didn't know that. And so it was something that nobody had been brave enough to tell him.
Yeah. They were afraid.
So it was then really useful for him. So when we did the team workshop, he put it out there.
Yeah.
And just said, tell me if I'm doing this.
Well, I was curious. I didn't know if that had gotten ever to a 360 level because, I learned this more recently is that, people with higher interpersonal sensitivity tend to perform a little better on 360s because people like working with them. But it may not have gotten to that level. But I was curious about that. But that is a great example. And even I'm sure you all have done way more feedbacks than I have. But in my experience, boy, you see that interpersonal sensitivity, you do kind of wonder like, where's this gonna go? But a lot of time people own it too. But in this case, it sounds like, that's not me. And sometimes when they're saying it's not me, that makes it more so that it is definitely you.
His blind spot.
Yeah, exactly. Jani?
I recently had somebody applying for a very senior position, and she did the Hogan Assessments, and when I gave her feedback, she was the successful candidate, very competent, just finished her MBA, and then her results came out being very low on ambition. And I was scoping and asking, so what's her career dream or progression? Where does she want to end up? And she was saying, in confidentiality, that she's really not here for the status, for the job title, she doesn't need to lead. She just doesn't know what next. It was more a natural progression in the environment that she finds herself in. And I think we had a very rich conversation around what does she need to know about the role and the requirements, and also how it might really tap her energy, and what is some of the blind spots with being quite low in ambition, and what the role requires. Because at that point in time, the role did require quite a strong, assertive leader. So I think, and that's one example that just happened the last week, where I think, again, it just creates so much strategic self-awareness for them to manage it, because it's not an excuse. I think one of my colleagues said it just earlier as well. It's not because you are low on ambition doesn't mean that you're not going to be good in that position. You just need to effectively manage it, and then also get the right people around you to support you in what you need to know and do.
Yeah.
Roberto, bring us home.
Yeah, the importance is not if your personality or ambition is high or low, but how you deal in your context, as I usually take this strategic self-awareness. That's the beauty of using Hogan. It's not just, reflecting on yourself, but for what I want to accomplish in this environment, in this period of my career, how should I drill up or drill down my characteristics of personality? And tied to the first question, I've loved to ask in the beginning of a feedback for 22 years. So how much of yourself did you see in what you read? And it's amazing. And I listened to Alan Church's interview.
Yeah,
He mentions
great interview,
and it's around 85%. So, and then it's a matter of humility. If the leader is humble enough to recognize the data research behind, and really starts working on when there is, that where the beauty comes. And in terms of example, what I thought, and inspired by Jackie Sam's article on the day I met myself, right? She recently wrote that. And I said, when I took my first Hogan, the first time was in December 2002. That was a great impact after 27 years in HR. To have that was the day I met myself, and really transformed probably the way I lead Atelier for 22 years now. So I think I'm a personal example of being reflected on my personality in my leadership, and at least I've been trying to improve.
Okay, I might have lied a little bit. I'm gonna ask one more question, if that's okay with you.
Good.
I just want to know, and we'll just go around, Jani, and we'll just to Melvyn, to Roberto. Where do you see the next 5-10 years in your market? When it comes to selling Hogan and trying to get more people, because I think our overall goal is we want to improve the entire global workforce, and that starts with people in all these different places, like you all are. What are you seeing in South Africa?
Yes. First of all, lots of opportunity. I think, we're not getting leadership right at this point. I don't think in the world we're getting leadership right. But I do believe that people are recognizing that self-insight and tools like, for example, Hogan, is becoming more of an essential than what I think it's been in the past. And I also think, even though there's a massive blow up in terms of a market growth, in terms of newbies coming into the market, they are looking for those, validated, well-researched things that they can trust, tools and procedures that they can trust, like, for example, the Hogan. So on the one hand, I believe there's still a lot of work that we need to do to ensure that people understand how to make use of this information, make sure that it's not only an assessment being applied, a decision to be made, and then not being used afterwards. Because the magic is not only selecting the correct individual, it is for us to ensure that the correct individual gets into the position, but then there's ongoing growth and learning that happens post a decision to be made. So what I'm saying, a lot of stuff, but basically there's a lot of opportunity, but a lot of work still to happen, especially in South Africa, but Africa in general.
Well, we got you there on the ground. We're going to be fine. Everything's going to go as planned.
I think for me, it's for the people who already embrace Hogan and use it is to keep focusing on the so what. So what do we actually do with it, rather than it just being a nice thing to be able to say, I've done it and this is what it looks like. And I think predominantly more in the UK is how do we help organizations cascade Hogan more? So particularly with HPI, get more use out of that for not just leadership, but spotting the potential earlier and moving it through the organization.
Yeah.
And Roberto?
Yeah, I see a challenge to that growth, and looking forward to hear Ryan's lecture on AI. I think AI will bother our field of assessments because people are so enthused with it, right? But on the other hand, I see more and more people moving from the shallow answers of other tests and coming for a more validated, stronger. So that's why we are betting, and also in educating our clientele, HR people, in terms of science, in terms of validity, to differentiate us. I call that my mission is to transform the way people choose what tests they're going to use for making so important decisions of people's life and people's career, using any simple instrument, because it's simple, because it looks good, and because it's cheap. So I think this is our mission in Ateliê, is to change the way people look at assessments and take it more seriously, and look after, take care with what AI is bringing up.
Thank you all so much. This was so much fun, and I'm glad to see you all. And that does it for this special episode of The Science of Personality. Cheers, everybody.
This has been the Science of Personality podcast, brought to you by Hogan Assessments. You can access all episodes on our website, thescienceofpersonality.com, or on the streaming service of your choice.